Hi, Apes. This is Mrs. Hubbard. We're going to talk about Chapter 6. Please read page 149, the opening article about how a forest reestablished itself through succession. Read that and understand that part. All right, here's the main ideas for Chapter 6. So, we're going to notice that nature exists at several levels of complexity. We have individual is one unit of natural selection. We have a population, and a population is something that has the same species and lives in a given area at a particular time. And evolution can work at the level of the population. Next, we have a community, and that's an interaction between a number of species. We have an ecosystem, which is the flow of energy and matter within a particular area. And then we have the biosphere, and that's looking at something that incorporates all of the Earth's ecosystems. Scientists who study the biosphere are looking at air, water, and heat around the whole globe, so that's looking at overall what's going on. Communities, again, the ecosystem, communities exist within the ecosystem, and an ecosystem looks at biotic, which is life in that area, and abiotic, things like temperature, precipitation, soil, that type of thing. So those are the how nature exists, all the way from the individual all the way up to the entire world. So nature exists at several levels of complexity. We're going to be talking about population in this chapter, and we need to define things. So first of all, population size is the total number of individuals within a given time and a prescribed area. Population density is how many individuals do you have within an area, or in the ocean within a volume. So on land, we'd talk about how many per square mile or how many per square hectare, something like that. In ocean, we'd say how many individuals per million gallons, things like that. That's population density. Population distribution is how many individuals are distributed with respect to one another. Do you have a whole bunch of individuals all clumped together, or are you all spread out? So let me give you some examples of that. Let me find it for you guys. So distribution, you could have a random distribution. So that would be like trees that individually distribute themselves within an area. And if you had a forest, you'd have random distribution because you'd have things just randomly put where they decide to go based on how they seed. If you have a uniform distribution, that would be like trees in an orchard. So know the difference between random distribution and uniform distribution for population distribution. We also look at the population sex ratio. How many males to females do we have? If they're pretty balanced, then that's going to help us figure out how many new babies we're going to have. If it's not distributed very well, then that's going to help us figure out that maybe we're going to have less babies coming in the next generation. The age structure also is going to tell us how the population is going to grow. If we have a lot of reproductive age individuals, then we're going to have a big population in the next successive generation. If we have a lot of old aged individuals, then we're not going to have a lot of new babies in the next generation. So all these things we look at to figure out how the population is going to change over time. So random distribution, things are just all over the place randomly. Uniform, they're all perfectly set up, like in an orchard. Sometimes this happens in nature by itself. And clump distributions are when you have things that are likely to be together. Like, for example, in the ocean you have a school of fish. All those fish are clumped together. Factors that influence population size, for example, density dependent factor would be like food. How much food do you have in an area, and that's going to determine how many individuals are going to survive. Density independent factors are things like if you had a tornado that came through and killed a bunch of the population, it doesn't matter how many individuals you have, it's just going to kill based on, just wiping out a bunch of stuff. It doesn't matter that, it doesn't matter how many individuals you have there. So when we look at population growth, it's usually an exponential curve, because every male-female couple bonding are maybe going to make, if they make a large litter, then it's going to grow really fast. So population grows with an exponential growth curve, and we'll have to use math to figure this out. And it's not hard, we'll figure it out together. The intrinsic growth rate is the maximum potential for growth under ideal conditions. That's called the intrinsic growth rate. And intrinsic growth rate is labeled little r. So this is the shape of a population curve where nothing is stopping the population growth, and so it goes up. It's called a J-curve. But most things don't go by J-curve. We have things modeled after an S-curve. So the logistic growth model so at the beginning you have this exponential curve, and then something's going to limit how many new offspring you can have. Maybe it's food or something like that, or maybe it's just size of the ecosystem that's going to limit how many individuals can live in that particular area. So this is called the logistic growth model. So it's initially exponential, and then something happens when it gets to the carrying capacity, which is labeled K. So this, from the exponential J-curve, it then becomes something called the S-curve, and it's when the population reaches the carrying capacity, we get an S-curve. And we use this to predict populations that are subject to density-dependent constraints, such as food, water, nesting sites, when we have competition going on between the individuals. So this is called the logistic growth model. You can have overshoot. See, this is that J-curve at the beginning, but then you have things that are happening like die-offs or overgrowth, too many babies happening, and then because there's too many babies, then there's not enough food and they die off. So this happens in real situations. It's called population oscillations. Oscillation just means going like this. So this is a variation of the logistic growth model. You'll have something called an overshoot when you have too many individuals going over the carrying capacity. You're making too many babies, and then a die-off is when there's not enough food or other things that the individuals need, and you'll have a die-off or a population crash, and it takes the population way underneath the carrying capacity. So you could also have predation. That means like predators coming and eating things, and that's going to mess with the shape of this curve as well. There's two types of species. There's K-selected species and there's R-selected species. This population grows slowly until it reaches the carrying capacity. So we are an example of a K-selected species. We have a long lifespan. It takes us a while before we reproduce. we only have one or two or three offspring, one baby, twins or triplets and things like that. We don't have mega amounts of kids at one time. So that's a K-selected species. An R-selected species is the exact opposite. You have super short lifespans. You are only a few weeks old maybe before you have kids, babies. You have many, many times when you reproduce. So this would be an example like mosquitoes or bacteria, something like that. That's an R-selected species. And there's a good chart on page 159 that shows you this, so you can get the idea. This chart you should memorize because they might ask an AP FRQ question on this in May. So look at that and make sure you understand that. So here's examples of the different survivorship curves based on if we have a K or an R species. A type 1 right here is something that's long-lived. Type 1 is a K species like an elephant, a whale, or a human. One of these guys is an R, okay, and that's called a type 3 survivorship curve. And there's things that also like to be in the type 3. They have a nearly constant decline over their age, and so these are a nice linear relationship. So when they're young, there's a lot of them, and as they get older and older, they just die off in a nice line. Humans, not so much. Dandelions look like this. So another difference between a type 1, type 2, and type 3 survivorship curve. And remember examples, so it will help you. So metapopulation just means the overall population. What does it look like? And what it looks like over a whole particular area. And so these are populations that are spatially distinct from each other, but there's a corridor that allows them to connect with each other and mate and make new kids. So that's a metapopulation. And so the strip of habitat that connects the two is called a corridor. So that's the end. Oh, oops, sorry. Make sure I got everything on here. We did that, we did that, we did that. Okay, so that's the metapopulation. So you'll have particular areas where the individuals live and they're able to connect with each other and find mates. So wolves and cougars have metapopulations because they can move and they can find a mate. Okay, we're done with the first part of chapter 6, and I'll see you later for the rest of chapter 6.